Hello everyone, welcome back to the YouTube channel, welcome back to another episode. My name is Dr. Alex George and this YouTube channel is all about alcohol-free living. My life passion is around mental fitness. I love talking about mental fitness but also love living it, and one of the biggest things that's made a difference is going alcohol-free. I haven't had a drop of alcohol now for well over 2 years. For those of you that have been following the channel, you know that I'm going to be talking about kind of how to live the best life that you can alcohol-free, how you can kind of cut down the booze, and essentially what this new world will look like. In this video, we're going to look at whether alcohol-free booze is actually good for you, worth it, or something you should consider. So we're going to look at the lens of, well, what is in alcohol-free booze, and is that stuff actually good for you? Let's think about sugar content, calories, preservatives, what's inside the stuff. We're also going to look at the social aspect of it. So do they actually fulfill the purpose of replacing alcohol for social events and enjoying and fun? And third of all, we're going to look at the financial side of this. So why are they so expensive? Should they be cheaper? And are you actually going to save money by swapping over from alcohol to alcohol-free? During this video, I'm also going to be trying a bottle of red wine, of course an alcohol-free one. And can I just say for a moment, it is 9:28 in the morning as I'm recording this. I am doing science for you guys, even though it feels weird to drink this, which is odd because this bottle here is 0% alcohol. There is no alcohol in this, but it still makes me feel a bit weird drinking red wine in the morning. Perhaps we'll come on to psychology of that, because does it make any sense? Anyway, we're going to get started with the video. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. It helps us reach more people and hopefully we can help more people find out about alcohol-free living. Thank you. Let's get started. Okay, let's start. Point one, what is inside alcohol-free booze? So how is the stuff made? So I've got a few different drinks in front of me here. I've got an alcohol-free beer. This is Birra Moretti. I don't know why I've struggled to say. A bottle of Moretti Zero in front of me here. What else have we got? We've got a mojito from Caleno here, and an M&S 0.5 dry botanical G&T. By the way, I'm not sponsored by any of these. I'd tell you if I was. Wouldn't change my thoughts on them. I'd just tell you if they were sponsored. Right, so first of all, I want to talk about some of the process that goes into it. So when I did the Channel 4 documentary, Alcohol-Free Booze, Is It Worth It? I visited a gin distillery and I was basically learning what's the process of making gin and then what's the process of making alcohol-free gin. So how do they make the alcohol-free G&T? So effectively, it's a very similar process. So the way that you draw or you get the taste of the botanicals inside this is by pulling the flavour out using the alcohol. So the challenge is, if you were not to use alcohol as part of the process of making this alternative, or the alternative to this drink, then the issue with that would be you wouldn't be able to have the flavours in the same way. So what they do essentially is they distill in exactly the same way they make normal gin. So you chuck all your kind of botanicals in there, your juniper berries, whatever flavours they want to put in, into the distilling vat thingy. They then do the process of distilling. So basically they kind of heat this pulp. It all evaporates, rises, and then condenses and then distills into a jar at the bottom. It's a very untechnical way of explaining it, but effectively it's what you need to understand. And what you're left with is the gin. Okay, now that process that would then go on to their next bottling process or whatever they do for the normal alcoholic gin. But for the non-alcoholic gin, or to create the alcohol-free drink, what they then need to do is remove the alcohol. So in the vacuum distillation process, essentially what they're trying to do is lower the boiling point. So imagine if you go into the top of Everest, your boiling point is a lot lower than it is down here at kind of sea level. So what they do is they spin the liquid. They reduce the pressure there through the vacuum process and they draw the alcohol off. So what happens is the alcohol comes off and it goes and ends up in this little jar. And what is left then is very, very low alcohol gin alternative. So less than 0.5. And that's an important point. What is alcohol-free drinks? So it's a little bit confusing in terms of how they name these things, but effectively anything that's less than 0.5 is considered an alcohol-free drink. Zero alcohol, for example, like this, means there is almost no, or of course zero alcohol in there. So that's how they do it. So there's an extra process. There's a bit more to it than that, but I don't think it's important for this conversation. What I want to kind of get out of it is that this is the process that you make it. There is an extra step in that process. that's going to factor into the cost, which we'll come on to later, and you're left with this alternative alcohol-free drink. So in the gin version, you should still have the flavors, the botanicals, and all those things that you really like. It's the complexity of the flavors. And when I was talking to the guys from Salcombe Distillery, what they were saying is that this is how the flavors and the complexity is still there in the alcohol-free drink, is because effectively the alcohol is the medium now to bring the flavor into the drink. So it's a necessary part of the process. The irony is, to make the alcohol-free drink, you kind of need the alcohol. Well, at least in the gin process. So looking at this M&S G&T, and let's bear in mind there's tonic water in here, so we're not actually looking at the pure gin here. There's 22 calories per 100 mil. This is 25, so 250 mil can. So there's what, like 60 calories or so in there. Carbohydrates 4.9 grams, of which sugar is 4.4 grams. So there are some sugars in here. Of course, probably a lot of that is in the tonic water. And this actually brings us on to a conversation around the calories. So I'm going to bring in the wine here actually and think about the calories for a moment. So we've talked about the process here of the gin. This red wine has a process of making that allows it to be the zero, but also keeps the flavors. So this company is called Wednesday's Domain, and effectively what they say is they de-alcoholize the red wine. So they make the red wine in the same way, and what they then do is take off the alcohol, but then put back in some of those natural flavors that make it taste nice. Because one of the biggest challenges is with wines, keeping the flavor and taste of it, because over the last 2 years, I've tasted many good like alcohol-free beers. I could name loads of them, loads of alcohol-free gin alternatives and so on, and those kind of flavors. I've very rarely tasted any good wines, and that's because in some way it's kind of water, some grapes and alcohol. When you start pulling out the alcohol, what are you really left with? And what a lot of the companies do is they chuck in a load of sugar at the end, and that's really important. So when you look at the back of these bottles, it's worth looking at the sugar content, because some of the sugar content in these is really high, especially in the sparkling ones. I seem to find the sugar content's really high. So it's worth thinking about that. So what they do is they make the red wine as normal, so then you have the nice flavors and so on that you'd have with any other bottle of red wine. You then pull the alcohol out of it, and then the additional step that they do is putting the flavors back in. So we're going to test and see in a moment whether this actually does taste good or not. But let's think about whether it's good for you or not, okay? And it's worth noting this. When I'm talking about good for you or not, I'm not talking about the comparison versus clean water, because clearly clean water is the best thing that you can drink, depending on the situation, but it's the best thing you can drink for your health. I'm talking about in the context of alcohol-free drinks or soft drinks and so on, okay? So what is in this? So per 750 ml, so this is a 750 ml bottle, there is 0% alcohol, and per 125 ml glass, so that's a medium glass, there's 18 calories. And in fact, the whole bottle contains 105 calories. That is really low. If you think about a large glass of wine, obviously this wouldn't be full, but if you think about a 250 ml serving of standard red wine, that's going to be well over 200 calories per glass, something like 220 calories depending on the strength and so on. So if you think about it, for one traditional glass of large red wine, you could have 2 bottles of this pretty much. Well, you could have 2 bottles of this. That's a really big difference. And a big part of that is just simply how calorific alcohol is. So think about it this way, 1 gram of alcohol is about 7 calories. 1 gram is about 7 calories. Comparatively, 1 gram of sugar is about 4 calories. So it gives you an idea of how calorific this stuff is. And one of the big things we found when I did the documentary with Channel 4 was that alcohol gets in the way of you burning your normal sugars and your carbs of your food. So we did the experiment, I mentioned in the other video, where essentially we compared, doing a cycling exercise without alcohol versus having a glass of wine. And what happens is your body has to burn the wine, or the alcohol in the wine, before it can get to your carbs and your fats and so on. So it's not just how calorific it is, it's also what it does to the way that we metabolize and use energy. So what else is inside these drinks? So fascinatingly, or what's fascinating, is that alcohol-free drinks have to have the nutritional information displayed on the back. Alcoholic drinks do not. which I think is very interesting. And one might wonder why an alcoholic drink might not want to put the nutritional information on the back. Perhaps there's no surprise. But what does happen, therefore, is people go naturally and look at the ingredients and go, oh my gosh, what are these things? Like what are stabilizers? What are sulfites, for example? And think, oh my gosh, they've filled this stuff full of extra things that, oh my God, what is in here? Well, sulfites are there to help preserve the drink. But sulfites are also in their alcohol cousins. So they're also contained, if you actually looked at what's inside red wine, they also contain preservatives like sulfites. So it's not something that's been put in now that we need to kind of panic about. We were happy to consume it when we were drinking the red wine as standard. And in terms of compounds, there hasn't been any concern from the kind of food standards agencies or the kind of regulators of what goes into food about these compounds. So they've been used for a long time safely. So I don't think there's anything in here extra that I would think, oh my gosh, I'm really worried about what that is. So effectively, this bottle is a standard bottle of red wine that has had the alcohol removed and flavouring put back in to allow it to be 0% alcohol. Shall we test it and see what it's like? Now, this is a bit high risk because I haven't actually opened, surprise, surprise, a bottle of wine in rather a long time. So this could go horribly wrong. We only have one bottle. Part of me is like, I hope this doesn't work out so that I don't have to drink a bottle of red wine. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's nonsense. Like, there's no alcohol in this. So there's no reason I should feel weird about it. But there's a psychology, isn't there? I need to go to the bottom, don't I? Oh my gosh, I've done this wrong, but it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. I've muscled through it. Okay, do I just pull it? I'm actually proud that I can't really open a bottle of red wine anymore. I kind of done it. And the good thing is it's not all over my trousers. Okay. Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? Because there's no reason I should feel weird about drinking this. But I guess it's into our psychology. Okay, so it smells nice. What's interesting is when you smell it is that usually when you smell a bottle of red wine or any other drink, you can smell the alcohol. So obviously there's no smell of alcohol. But I can smell kind of that it is a red wine or it tastes like a red wine. I'm not going to actually measure this out because I'm just kind of taste testing it. Let's try and do this without making a mess on my lovely table. Okay, let's do the smell. So apparently you're only supposed to smell it when it's open to check that it's not corked, isn't it? What's the equivalent? Can you cork a bottle of alcohol-free red wine? There's a question in the comments, let me know. Okay, it smells nice. Let's see what it tastes like. God, that's strange. That is basically a glass of red wine, which is actually really odd because I haven't had one for a long time. That's really interesting. Wow, that's kind of crazy because that does actually just taste like a normal glass of red wine minus the alcohol. Wow, that is absolutely strange. Because obviously I haven't tasted a glass of red wine for a long time. That's the closest that I have tasted to it. And oddly, I don't know why, because it's so close, it makes you question, like, is there alcohol in it? But there isn't alcohol. So what I would say is actually a really important point there. And this obviously comes down to the reason you stop drinking. But this is exactly why a lot of people say struggle with addiction. And the addiction side of it would say, well, I wouldn't have an alcohol-free drink because it can be triggering or it can kind of, because of those psychological pathways I mentioned about even having a drink in the morning, of course, it can make you kind of flick into like that, thinking about the alcohol. So I actually really understand why someone would want to be careful about that. But, from the perspective of not being addicted, but wanting to taste something similar, that's really nice. I'm quite impressed with that. So that's certainly the first red wine that I've drunk and thought that is actually worth drinking. Because a lot of the time I think, what's the point? And so that brings us on to our next question, I guess. Do they do the job in terms of the kind of social aspect? Like, is it healthy for us socially to have these? Does it do the job? And I guess it comes down to the question of what are you using it for? If you're using these drinks and you're expecting them to give you the kind of relaxation effect that alcohol gives you in social situations, so the kind of numbing effect, they're not going to do that. But as I spoke about in other videos, actually, most of that is about going to the social event, leaning into it, allowing yourself 15, 20 minutes and allowing the natural connection of people around you and the relaxation into the environment of doing the job of relaxing you, and it does a wonderful job. You just got to kind of lean into it. But from a social aspect, I think it's really great, and I think that's why I've really enjoyed having these, like the beers and so on, because you want to have a moment where you celebrate or you enjoy something, you relax. Like on Saturday night, was it Saturday night? Yes, or Sunday night. Sunday night had a lovely kind of spag bol, kind of homemade meal, and I didn't want to have water with it or squash. I wanted to have something, so I cracked open a bottle of alcohol-free beer. So it's a feeling that you can still enjoy these moments and do something different. So from that perspective, I think they do a really good job. Do they give you a high? No. Do they give you that kind of buzz that alcohol will give you? No. But there's so many other ways you can get that feeling, okay? And you get a buzz from the social connection. You get the buzz from laughing with your friends or getting outdoors and doing things. Do I think they do a good job? Yes, I do. From that social perspective, it's something to enjoy. You can talk about them. Like if you turn up and you go, well, I'll try a glass of this alcohol-free wine, and you're chatting about it, it still gives you that sense of connection over a nice glass. Right, let's talk about the money side of it, because this is important. And as I hinted about with the G&T, there are extra steps, including with this, of course. I've mentioned that there's a de-alcoholization process, then putting the flavors back in. All of that, of course, comes at a cost. So in the UK, I know there are people in the US watching this. In the UK, we have a taxation on alcohol. I wonder if you have that in America. I'd imagine you must do as well. There's a taxation applied to alcohol, and it's quite high. So a bottle of gin that was, say, £30 in sterling is going to be about £10 of tax. So naturally, people ask the question of like, well, how can like this beer cost not far off the same price of a alcoholic beer if there's no alcohol in it? That's because of the steps that are involved. So when you realize that there's volume in making, say, traditional gin, you've got the volume part of it, of money saving in terms of volume, but also less steps. So I'm actually burping in over that. Okay, keep burping. Sorry, but I think it's the wine is making burp. Alcohol-free wine. When you look at gin, for example, you're making huge volumes because there's a lot more gin being made of the alcohol version than there is non-alcohol at the moment. You've got the volume aspect, and also you've got less steps. So even though there's a taxation, it's less expensive to make. Making the non-alcoholic version is more expensive. So in a way, I understand it. Do I think it's worth it? I do. I mean, I guess the question is, do people buy it? So this idea of, the market dictates what something's actually worth. People are spending their money on this. In fact, non-alcoholic drinks sales in this country are skyrocketing. They're growing so much, so people are willing to pay it. They feel that it is worth it, and I agree with them. Would I like these drinks to come down in price? Yes. Do I think they will? Let's see. As technology comes through and that technology becomes scalable and so on, there's no reason why these drinks can't get a bit cheaper. The other aspect to consider, though, with the pricing is this. When it comes to alcoholic drinks, they're more-ish, right? So you have a couple of pints, you have more pints. Generally speaking, you just don't drink as much of the non-alcoholic version. So I'd probably have like 2 of these, then I'd have like sparkling water or something else. So even though that can might be as expensive, I'm not drinking 6 cans. I'm having maybe 1 or 2, worth bearing in mind. And ultimately, when you broaden it from a finance perspective, and I look at the 2 years that I didn't drink, I saved loads of money. So part of it is the not spending money on the takeaways, the silly taxis that you didn't need to get, the food the next day that you bought, and all the drinks. You do save a lot of money. And I have always drank the non-alcoholic drinks when I've gone out and about. So you do save money. There is an area of alcohol-free drinks that's really interesting, that's growing, I'd say steadily, and certainly in terms of interest, and that's the alcohol-free drinks that promise an alternative high. There's a few of these on the market. We'll pop some of them on the screen now, and they promise, or they say that they will deliver a feeling of relaxation, a bit of a buzz that you'd have with a glass of alcohol, basically. The premise or the idea is that they do this without the hangover effect. And a lot of these work on neurotransmitters such as GABA. So GABA is a neurotransmitter, a pathway in the brain that alcohol works on that causes some of these effects. But also alcohol doesn't just specifically affect the feeling of relaxation. It also causes all sorts of other feelings and emotions, and also the hangover, the liver, and all that kind of stuff, the sequelae that comes with drinking it. The idea of these drinks is that it's supposed to specifically target this pathway without causing all that stuff. Now, I'm interested in that. That's fascinating, but I'm also a little bit dubious because generally speaking, in science, as with life, whenever there's an up, there's a down. So I'm not saying it doesn't work. It's not my place to say that. I don't have the science, the evidence, sorry, to say that. My question is, will they have that effect, the up, without the down? And I think that'll be something to keep an eye on in the future. But also, I guess from my perspective, I don't drink because I want sober clarity. So I don't really want an alternative that's going to give you not having clarity. So I don't know, that's my personal perspective. So in summary, do I think these drinks are good for you? So obviously the best option is water. So my comparison of good for you is going to be comparing to soft drinks like fizzy cokes, alcoholic drinks and other non-alcoholic alternatives. That's my comparison of good. So in summary, I believe yes. So essentially these drinks are a lot less calorific. They don't have alcohol in them, which is clearly a positive. Some of them actually have like beneficial nutrients in them. So there's a brand called Erdinger, which is an isotonic drink, which is a beer that's isotonic and alcohol-free, that people drink at the finishing line of marathons to kind of help with rehydration and balancing of electrolytes. So look, they're definitely much better than the alcohol cousins in terms of the preservatives and so on. Obviously, I can't speak for all the drinks out there. Don't have a big disclaimer that I've not gone around testing what every preservative is. But on the whole, a lot of the preservatives you find in the non-alcoholic drinks, you'll find those similar compounds like sulfites in alcohol alternatives. Socially, I think they do a good job. It's a good alternative. It's enjoyable. You can have fun having these drinks. And well, like this one, tastes really good. And in terms of finances, even though a lot of them are similar prices to like a beer for a beer or kind of not far off the similar price, I think on the whole, they will be cheaper because you'll drink less of them and over time the prices should come down. Guys, I hope you found this video useful and interesting. I hope you're proud of me. In the name of science, I drank what essentially tasted like red wine in the morning for you guys. I actually really think it was very good. I think they've done a good job with that, and I suspect we're going to see better and better alternatives coming as the science and the tech gets there. Do let us know in the comments any other topics you'd like us to cover, because essentially in the series of videos I'm releasing every Sunday, I'm trying to bring videos that will help you, coming from what it's like to live alcohol-free, the pros, the cons, the ways of doing it, the things that come up within that, finances and so on. So just, drop it in the comments, write in the comments, what is it that you find useful? What would you like to know more of? And then when we sit down to make videos, we'll focus on those topics. Thank you guys, take care, look after yourselves, and goodbye.